Let it touch. Yes. Okay. Right. So good morning, class. Right. And we actually start today's class with a feedback session that we have today. Now, feedback session where feedback on the last week's practice questions that I've given you, which is part of your class participation. Right. What when I saw the answers, there was some of you, like there was a little way. There are some ways where I'm not saying it's wrong. There are ways where you can improve. Like some of you have written the answers, you've just given one sentence or two, just very, which doesn't explain, or two sentences, but it is not very clear to me. It was quite vague. Or there were questions which I said, explain with the help of an example. Some of you just written the name of the organization. When you explain with the help of the example, you actually need to relate the topic with that example and start saying how it's related. That is expected. Okay, because these, as I said earlier, these practice questions, what you're doing, of course, it's part of class participation, but also I'm getting you prepared for your midterms as well as final exams. Because if you write like this, then you're surely going to lose marks drastically. So you need to be very, very careful with this. Okay, so this is what I have to say. Like, I'm not telling you to write pages after pages, was 3 4 sentences which clearly explain what you're saying. And when you have some things called example, you need to not just give the example but say what is happening. So quite a lot of you have actually explained the example, but there have been some of you already know your when you submitted your answers, you know where you went wrong. So that's where you actually have to uh, give a little more explanation. Okay, so that is important. That is important for writing it. Okay, so this is where I actually have to say whatever I have to say from my point of view of the feedback session. Now, for the last week's practice questions, so what I'm going to actually start is, I'm going to start with you the second part of today's unit, that is where we are talking about culture. Okay, can you all see the slides? Are you all able to see the slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, right. So let's actually start with the first thing that we have, that is where we call what is called culture. Okay, that's the second part of today of your unit 5, talks of organizational culture. Now, culture is not the culture of our society, but culture of the organization. Okay, so when we say culture, it is actually, we are talking about, like, it talks of how organizations are doing things. We have discussed this in our previous classes, where every organization have their own way of doing work, own way of working. So how they do it, that's an environment, working environment, the do's and don'ts, ethics. It talks of certain things which are very much obvious, certain things which are not obvious. So what is it? It's That's where I'm talking about the second thing where we talk. It's talking about the values and the rituals. Values and rituals of whom? Of the organization. Every organization have their own values. That's where we talk of ethics. We talk of morals. Rituals are, when we talk of rituals, we are talking of the customs. What are the practices that the organization does? And when every employee, every member of the organization is following this, that means what? They are working together. That's why we talk as integrate or integration. Integrate means to unite, to work together. That's the symbol of the organization. For example, you know what happens when we talk of the Tata Group? They have a specific uniform where even the bosses wear the same uniform once they enter the campus of the organization, of their own organization. Inside the campus, they are all wearing the same uniform. When they work with, yes, the boss is sitting in the office. Only then you get to know. If you are an outsider and you don't know, you will not be able to know who is the boss, who are the employees, who are the ones who are working under them. And what also happens is when they have their lunch, they are all sitting on the same table. There's no distinction. So that's where I'm saying that's integrate, or you are working together, and that's the symbol. Okay. So it's also when we say organization culture, it's civilization in the workplace. Civilization, like what happens if you any in a society is civilized. Civilized means there are some rules and regulations, laws, which people abide by it. And in an organization, if there are no rules and regulations, if there are no consequences of if you make a mistake and there are no consequences to it, then it becomes problem. So that is where I'm talking of civilization. Law comes into play. Everything's there. Okay, and it is also any organization's immune system. Immune means what? When you are able to prevent yourself from any problems that is coming up. So it is you are able to tackle any problem. Say for instance, today the whole world is facing a problem. Organizations have their own backup system. They have a system how they're going to tackle this situation. So that is where, so that which is helping them not to collapse. That is why, because there is certain rules and regulations, a proper framework. So which is why when we talk, so it becomes an immune system. Okay. So when we actually start defining culture, so what we actually say is like culture, as I said, it's of course it helps in, it's an unwritten social order. It's not written there. You have, when you join an organization, say for instance right now you are at RTC, when you had your orientation there were some do's and don'ts and you have the handbook, but there are certain do's and don'ts which you see and it's not there in the handbook. Yeah, so culture is, RTC also has their own culture which is not written. It's unwritten, but very much which is ethical. It's in order, it's well much structured. Okay, so which is why when we talk of culture, it helps us, an individual, to come up with a shape or redefine their attitude towards work, attitude towards employees, their behaviors comes into play. So that's how it goes. It's also helps you, like what happens, that it tells you the norms which is there, the cultural norms that is there, that helps us also in telling that what should be encouraged, what should be discouraged, what should be accepted, or what should be rejected within the group. Okay, so this is these are the things which culture helps us. Now, as we say, when we talk of culture, now what happens is culture is a group phenomenon. Okay, when we say culture, it is a group phenomenon. Why? Because you are not an individual who's working, just one person who's working there. Organization comprises of group, everyone. So it is applicable for every single person. That's why it's group. Okay, when we talk, that's why I said it's shared. Pervasive, when we say pervasive, pervasive means when it is actually prevailing throughout the organization, multiple levels. Permeate means to trickle down or to pass. So the culture is applicable right from the top level bosses to the lower level employees. Then the third thing that comes up is enduring. Enduring is your resistance power. Okay, how you can withstand. So what happens, like culture, when we know these, what helps, it helps us to shape ourselves. Culture does help us to shape ourselves, and when we shape our thoughts, shape our actions from the long term perspective, that helps us. And also when we say it is implicit, implicit means things which are not seen. You cannot see. These are the unwritten things which is there. But what happens? People working there, they can actually understand, because as I gave you the example of RTC today, what happens? There are certain do's and don'ts which actually helps you to know what has happened if I do not work, if I violate certain code of conduct, what will happen. So we also shape ourselves and we respond to the change of situations. Say, for instance, change of situations here is today when we were having in the classes, our classes were going on in your respective classrooms, but given this situation, we had to there has to be a change. There had to be a change in the way the classes are going on. Virtual learning, it's the same faculty who's taking class, same group of students, but the mode of class, teaching the class has changed. So we are getting change, we change it according to the situation. Okay, so when we actually talk of the primary dimensions of culture, so what happens up here is, now there are two types of culture, that we two dimensions that we have. I'll explain this through the diagram up here. First thing that comes up is where we talk of how people are interacting, which is on the x-axis. The other dimension is how people respond to change, which is on the y-axis. Okay. Now, how people respond to, let's talk of how people interact. How do people interact when changes are coming into a particular culture, or when things are changing? You can either be independent, where you can work by yourself, you can do it. That's on one extreme. The other extreme talks of where you need to depend on others, where you're working in a group. In a group, what happens? Like, you have to depend on the others. There are different departments, so you have to work hand in hand, but also you have your own work, certain work, where you have to work by yourself, make your own decisions. That's the first dimension. The second that comes up is how people respond to change. Now, changes, when we say certain things are stable, stability, as we say, comes from the word stable, which is consistent, which is where you can predict that this is the change that's coming up, this is what's going to happen, this will be the consequences. But certain things are flexible, where it you need to adapt to changes. Okay, where you have to adapt to changes. Now, again, if I take the example of what is happening right now throughout the world because of this global problem. Now, as students, what do we know? That what is the stability that is there? You all know that classes will happen. It's obvious. There won't be any change. But what is the flexibility? The way the classes are being held. It's not in-person classes, but through virtual learning. Okay, so that's the thing, right? So what happens when we actually, based on these the two dimensions that we have 8 different types of company culture. Okay, so we are actually going to discuss that. I'm going to show you the picture and then I'll explain this. Okay, so if you see, there is flexibility and stability, like how people respond to change on one hand, and we have on the x-axis how people interact, where we have independence and interdependence. Okay, so the first thing, when we look into where there is flexible, when we look into the combination of interdependence and flexibility, right? So what we first come up is caring, right? When we talk of caring, so what are we talking of? We are focusing on interdependence, means relationships. We are also talking of mutual trust, right? Flexibility means the work environment is, it's a nice environment, it's a warm environment, and people work together. They are supporting each other. There is loyalty there, right? There is loyalty. And what happens? The leaders up there, leaders in such a situation, they talk about, because we are talking of interdependence, it talks about teamwork and a positive relationship. That's why it's flexible. Okay. The second that comes up is where we talk of purpose. Purpose is basically what happens, it's a situation where we are talking of concern for others. That is, as we say, it's called altruism. The term is called altruism. Altruism is where when we work, we think about others' welfare, others, others' welfare. Okay, and it's also talking about idealism. Idealism means it's something which we want to achieve. It's theoretically acceptable, but reality it's not possible. It's not possible in reality, but that's the ideal situation. So that's what happens when we talk of purpose. Why are you doing the work? You're doing it to achieve something which is theoretically the best, but it's not possible in reality. Or you're doing it because you're thinking about others. Okay, so here what happens, employees all work together, they are staying focused, and for the long term sustainability. And also what happens, leaders are actually, that's when we say the leaders start saying that this is what we have to achieve, something which is theoretically acceptable. This is what we want to achieve, which may or may not be possible to achieve. Okay, and actually where we actually think about, when leaders are actually thinking about the welfare of the society, they're thinking from the global perspective. Okay, so on the third side what we have is, we have something again where we talk of flexibility and we talk of independence. That is the first thing that we come across is learning. Okay, so when we talk of learning, learning is something where it has to be done by yourself, and where you need to be creative. You have to look in for something new. You cannot be stagnant. You have to start looking for something new and start working, come up with something new. Could be a new idea, could be also a response to an existing problem, or so you have a business plan is there which is working, how to improve upon it because there are more competitors coming. So that's learning. Okay, and what happens, work environment in such a situation is where it's people are able to start thinking of coming up with new things. So it's inventive. Inventive means when you come up with new things, and because if you are creating, it's a creative an environment where creativity is emphasized, that means what happens, people working are open-minded people, including your bosses. Okay, so people here have, what happens is employees, they are very much curious to come up with something new, to learn something new, how we can go beyond the existing situation. Okay, and also when we talk of leaders actually, they emphasize or they actually concentrate on the factor that it has to be, everyone had the environment has to be innovative. People have knowledge, they emphasize on knowledge, that you have to enrich your knowledge, and adventure comes up when you try something new. You do not know what's going to happen. The fourth type that we have is called enjoyment. Okay, now enjoyment, when we talk of enjoyment, what happens, it's fun to work and excitement. And what is here, when we have fun and excitement, the atmosphere, working culture is also what happens, it's not very stiff, it's lighter situation, people can actually enjoy themselves, people can do what makes them happy, it makes them happy. So what happens, there's, and what are they doing, how can they do, how are they united, they are all working together because, and there is a situation where a concept which is called stimulation or stimulate. Stimulation comes from the word stimulate. Stimulate means it's an incident or a thing that encourages you to do something new. And what is that, something which you would enjoy doing it, right? So here what happens, what are the bosses doing, they also talk about spontaneity. Do not plan beforehand, do on spot, do what's coming up, would do something which would, where you would get satisfaction. Just salary is not enough, something else, how would you be satisfied? So, and also there has to be a sense of humor coming there, because if the atmosphere is a dull atmosphere, then it becomes really bad. You need to, when you're working, you have to have a sense of humor also, otherwise the situation is really bad. Okay, so the fifth one that comes up is called results, where we have, of course, we have flexibility, stability there, and independence. So here what's happening, stability, when we talk of stability, that means there has to be some purpose, that is some definite goals. So achievement comes into play. Achievement, when we say that is stable, that what are we trying to achieve. And also with the achievement talks of winning, or winning, that winning attitude, that we're going to complete this, we have to be successful there. Okay, work environment here is very much based on outcome. Why are we doing this work? That's why we are talking of result. Why are we doing this work? What is it, like how do we achieve this? It's also talking of merit. When we are doing it, we're getting a result. That means we get recognition, we get promotion, it becomes better. Employees here, what is happening? The employees working in such an organization, they have one thing in mind, like they are working based on their capability. Capability comes into play. When we talk of results, capability comes into play. And they're also talking of success. I'm capable enough to do this work, so which means independence comes into play. And I want success, that's where your stability, you have all capable or experts who have the required skills. The sixth one that comes up is authority. Authority means what? Where decision making comes into play. Okay, decision making, where you're talking of the strengths, where you can make, sometimes make a bold decision. So work environment in this case is competitive. Who is better? I need to prove myself. That comes into play here. Okay, it's where people are actually working for their own personal gains, not for the entire organization's gains. How do I benefit if I do a particular job? That is most importance here. So when you are actually working, authority means what? Here the leaders or the bosses are talking of dominance. Authority means dominance. That's where you need to be confident with your work. So authority comes when you're talking of confidence also. Going to the seventh type is where we talk of safety, where we have stability and interdependence coming into play. So safety means what? How can you be safe? You need to plan beforehand. You have to be cautious. You have to prepare beforehand. Working environment in this case is, if you plan everything, you know what's going to happen, so it is predictable. You can predict that this will be the situation, this will be the outcome. Where people, what is happening, people are very much risk conscious, they do not want to take any risk. Safety means, oh, that's the opposite of risk. So you do not want to take any risk, and you plan thinking very carefully. So employees, what's happening here? Employees are actually working with a thing, with a feeling that they want protection. They want safety. Okay, they need to feel protected in such an organization. That is the working environment such where there is enough protection, and where if changes are coming, we can predict, or anticipate means to predict the change that comes up. So leaders here in this such an organization, they are very much realistic, very much realistic. We had learned here in purpose, when we talk of purpose, that leaders are, they were idealistic, but in safety just the opposite. Leaders are very much realistic, they are planning ahead. And the last type that we have here is order. Order is where it's structured, there is respect, there are, and we are, because we are talking of, once again, interdependence, and we have stability coming. Stability, it's more on interdependence to the right, means more on interdependence and less on the stability side. So here it's very much structured. People are sharing their norms. What are the norms of the organization that shared? They talk to each other, good practices. That is, when we say that what are the good practices, you should share with each other. Work environment in such a case, because it's order, it's methodical. Methodical means it's the same, going on and on and on, day by day, year after year, it's the same thing. And people are working only the, or their assigned work, which where they fit in based on their qualification, based on their skills. So Employees have, they need to work together because you cannot do everything to by yourself. There has to be cooperation. And of course, what happens up here is the leaders, they are talking about, because it's order, they are talking about procedures. They're talking of procedures, they're talking about time bound system, time bound customs. Okay, so what exactly happens is we have these 8 different types of culture which is there. So that is why do we have 8 different types? It helps us to actually and identify and actually analyze the complex situation, the behavioral patterns. That's how we get to know about it. Okay, so if I actually give you the examples, different companies are following this. Okay, when we talk of, let's talk, start from the top here. When we talk of learning culture, example that we have is when we talk of the company Tesla company, where they have been doing this. When we talk of purpose, we have actually the Whole Food is also a company. When we talk of caring, we have Disney World. When we talk of order, where everything has to be done in a methodical way, the Securities and Exchange Commission. When we talk of safety, we are, there is an example where we talk of the Lloyd's, the bank. The Lloyd's is a bank in London. Okay. When we talk of authority, you have an example which is called Huawei, that is there. When we talk of results, we have an example of GSK, and when we also have enjoyment coming into play, we have the example of something, a company which is called Suppose. Okay, so these are the different companies which are actually following the different situation. They are following the different cultures, and so we actually we see that different cultures are being practiced. Like each company is practicing different types of culture, and so then it's very much specific. Now the question that comes up is, how do we know which company is following which culture and why are they following that culture? That's the big question. Why are they following that culture? They are following the culture because it's again based on, when we started the class of the OB, we said that every organization has a specific framework. They have a specific framework, and that is it's based on the strategy. It's based on the long-term goals, and based on that, the plans are coming. And then you think how many people you need, how many departments you need, how is the work going to go about, and what sort of business. So it all starts from there, and that's how you depend. And it also depends on who your boss is. If your boss is very much an authoritarian person, they would want something as order. They want authority up there. You cannot say anything. If your boss is a democratic leader, so they would want participation. And the situation changes. So it depends on who is the boss of your organization at that time. Bosses change, culture changes. Also, with the type of business you're doing, you're coming up with new ideas, new projects, and the culture starts changing. Or the third thing that comes up is employees. Some of the time, employees, like you start with a very friendly environment, but then what happens? The boss is also very much democratic, but then certain employees start taking undue advantage of that situation. Then what will you do? If you are the owner and you see some of your employees are creating problems, they're not letting you work, they're creating problems for you, they are not working themselves, they are not allowing others to work, obviously your approach will change and the work culture changes. Then everything gets changed. It's because of one or two persons. So it all varies. And that's based on this, the work culture. You have different organizations having different work culture, but that doesn't mean the work culture will remain the same throughout. When bosses change, work culture also changes. Okay, so this is what we have for today's class. Now, any questions from your side? Anyone has any questions? Do you have any questions? Is there any question from anyone?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So if you do not have anything, then what basically I will be doing is I will actually start go with the third part of today's class, and what basically where you know that you have an assessment to do, a debate. Have you read the debate topic?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. What is the
Yes, ma'am.
topic? What does it say?
Emotional intelligence as the basis of personal selection. No, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
So
So
debate topics.
yes, so where you will actually have to, this is where we are talking of the employees from the employees' point of view. We're talking of the culture, right? So culture means employees comes into play. So you have to think, right? You have to think, read it. You have to think whether it's right or wrong. Like, what do you feel about it? What do you place yourself in the point of an employee who's working in an organization? Put yourself in that position and see what happens. How would you see that? Now, when you're writing the answer, you have to be, do not give me any general answers. You have to be very much specific with what you are doing. Your answer should be related to the question, to the topic. When you're writing it, I do not want one sentence coming up. You need to have two, three sentences explaining your point. You should be able to defend yourself. That's the second thing. Before you submit, please check whether it makes sense. Okay, so you need to do it, but justify yourself. I don't want huge answers, that I don't want. That is a word limitation, you know this. So you write it, but with proper justification, proper explain your point, explain your reasons. And you need to actually say, when you're saying debate, whether you support it, whether you don't support it. Or certain times what happens is, yes, there are certain where you talk from both angles. You can talk from both angles, that is also acceptable. That certain things, yes, but sometimes it may not be. So you can, it's your choice. You have the choice of working. So think very carefully and then write it. And once it's there also on the Google page. So once we finish the class, you can actually go to the Google Classroom, the classwork page, read it, answer the questions there itself. You know how to write it, where you need to submit. You have done it before, just submit there. Okay, and there's another thing which I have to actually say it, as I was telling you before the start of the class today, like where some of you are not there. All of you actually know that your midterm exams is starting from the 4th to 8th of May. The timetable will be out very soon, and next week I will finish this chapter, that is on the 23rd and 30th of this month. I want every single student online. All of you should be online, because I will do a practice test with you based on all your chapters, so that, and I'll tell you how the test will, how your midterms will be conducted. Of course, it will be through online, but how, which forum, and I'll make you practice so that on the day of exams, you do not have any problem. You know how to go about with it. Okay, does it make sense to all of you? Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And when you are actually writing today's answer, once you finish writing your answer, please submit. As I've said, as my instruction says, submit on the G class to it, so that it is, I get to it and I check it. And also please submit on the really. If by chance some of you have told me that, ma'am, you're finding it difficult to submit on the really, maybe you're that wherever you are, your the internet accessibility is not so strong or problem. If that is a problem, just let me know. Okay, but otherwise, please do it. Submit on the G class as well as on the VLE, right? And you need to submit this by 1 o'clock today. Okay, but please, why am I saying this at 1 o'clock today? Because you need to actually practice submitting on time. Midterm exams, you will not be given extra time. Please keep that in mind. Okay, so is it clear with all of you? It's okay with all of
Yes,
you?
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.